It's a new semester and you're just starting your freshman year at college. You go to your first college party and an upperclassman gives you a bag of what look like dried mushrooms and says that you should try some because they could really help with the stress you're feeling from being at college and being in a new place. So you try some, and of course, you have hallucinations, but along with those hallucinations, you have feelings of euphoria, peacefulness, and as you yourself describe it, a spiritual awakening. Afterwards, once the psilocybin is out of your blood, you ask yourself, why do I no longer have the anxiety that I used to? Well, let's talk about that on today's episode of The Science Behind That.
Welcome to The Science Behind That with Atticus Hamilton.
Hello, all you scientists out there, and welcome back to the sixth and final episode of our six-part drug mini-series. And as you heard from the intro, we're talking about psilocybin, which is honestly like one of my favorite drugs to talk about. Now, I've never used psilocybin, but it is one of my favorite drugs to study and to talk about because, one, it comes from a mushroom, and I consider myself an amateur mycologist, and I really like fungi. They're really cool. Two, it has a range of beneficial medical applications. And three, it is probably one of the most unfairly demonized drugs on the planet. And to give you an example of, of that, let's run through what countries psilocybin is legal in. Now, I would say illegal in, but that is half the world, so that would be a long time. So psilocybin is completely legal in the Bahamas, Brazil, British Virgin Islands, Jamaica, the Netherlands, Nepal, Samoa, and I believe that's it. Yep, that's it. Now, mind you, there are several countries where like the legality of it is weird because it's either illegal but not enforced or decriminalized but not technically legal. For example, in the United States, possession is illegal federally, but it has been decriminalized in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Denver, Colorado, Oakland, California, Santa Cruz, California, Somerville, and Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Washington, D.C. It is legal in Oregon and decriminalized in Oregon for recreational use. And so the question then is, why is it illegal in so many of these countries? I can't tell you, ladies and gentlemen. I honestly couldn't tell you because if we're being honest, psilocybin is less deadly than weed. Psilocybin is less dangerous than marijuana, less dangerous than caffeine, far less dangerous than alcohol, far less dangerous than nicotine, yet it is one of the most banned substances in the entire world. But before we get ahead of ourselves, for the fellow chemistry fanatics out there, let's talk about what its chemical formula is. The chemical formula for psilocybin is carbon 12, hydrogen 17, nitrogen 2, oxygen 4 phosphate. And its molar mass is 284.25 grams per mole, and it is water soluble. Now, psilocybin doesn't do anything in the body, but its metabolite, psilocin, is what does all of the things that is associated with psilocybin, right? And so psilocin's formula is carbon 12, hydrogen 16, nitrogen 2, oxygen 1. And so what does psilocin do? It causes euphoria, peacefulness, a spiritual awakening. rapid emotional changes, derealization, which is basically like a disconnect from reality, depersonalization, which is a feeling of disconnect from yourself, dilated pupils, vertigo, drowsiness, decreased concentration, muscle weakness, loss of coordination, new sensations, nausea, paranoia, confusion, hallucinations, and emesis, which is vomiting. So that was fun, wasn't it? The half-life of psilocybin is 4 to 6 hours, and the time between ingesting it and before your first, I don't want to call them symptoms, effects appear, is 30 minutes. So let's get into, we've talked about what it does, but let's actually get into what it does to the brain from a physiological perspective. So psilocybin, binds to pretty much every region of the brain, but it does bind to the prefrontal cortex with heightened specificity. And what it binds to are serotonin receptors throughout the brain. Now, it does bind to some vision receptors in the occipital lobe, which is what causes the visual hallucinations, and it does bind to some auditory receptors in the temporal lobe, which is what causes the auditory hallucinations, but generally it binds to serotonin receptors throughout the prefrontal lobe, or prefrontal cortex. And what this does is it increases the expression of serotonin in the brain. So, this causes the feelings of euphoria, drowsiness, happiness, right? Peacefulness, and the spiritual awakening. But psilocybin does so much more than that. In studies that came from before the Nixon administration in the United States, and as recent as this past year in 2018 from the Netherlands, the United States, and France, it was determined that in low concentrations, psilocybin demonstrated the ability to regenerate neurons in mice, right? So what does this mean? Well, this means that you could potentially use psilocybin to treat diseases such as Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, maybe even Lou Gehrig's disease. All of these diseases in some way cause destruction to neurons. And it has been determined that psilocybin can regrow neuronal structures, which is very interesting, and we don't actually know the mechanism behind that, but we do know that it is occurring. Another thing we do know is that in patients who have chronic depression, 82% of them reported a complete alleviation of their chronic depression 2 months after one dose of psilocybin. One dose. So we're talking about patients who had been on antidepressants their entire life. They take one dose of psilocybin and they feel happy, not just during the time having the psilocybin, but for months afterwards. Additionally, psilocybin is non-addictive, and marijuana is addictive, and also for some of you who are like, marijuana isn't addictive, Atticus. It is. Go listen to my episode about marijuana. But in all honesty, psilocybin has so many medical applications, from regenerating neurons potentially in Alzheimer's patients, Parkinson's patients, and Lou Gehrig's disease patients, to alleviating depression and chronic anxiety, as well as a host of other things. Stuttering that comes from a purely cognitive basis can be, we have examples of it that demonstrate that psilocybin can stop stuttering in individuals that stutter because of a neurological impairment. And so the more research we do on this, the more we discover, or the more applications of psilocybin we discover. And so I think the natural place to go next is, why is it so attacked, victimized in society. And ladies and gentlemen, I wish I could tell you, but I honestly do not know why psilocybin is so demonized in society. But it is without a doubt one of the most demonized substances. So ladies and gentlemen, as a recap, not only can psilocybin be used as a recreational drug, it demonstrates potential to be used in medical applications that require new growth of neurons, right? Increasing memory because of that new growth of neurons, treating depression, treating chronic anxiety, and a whole host of other psychological and physiological and neurophysiological ailments of the brain. And all of this without the addiction. Psilocybin is not addictive, and as far as my research showed, there has never been a single case of somebody dying directly from an overdose of psilocybin. So ladies and gentlemen, while I'm not condoning drug use, I hope this episode was educational for you guys, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode on psilocybin. Have a wonderful Monday, everybody, and I will see you guys on Friday with another episode of The Science Behind That. And as always, remember, stand up and question everything.